All righty. Well, thanks everybody for coming back to this meeting. We are going to, in the essence of time, kind of briefly go over what we did last time in preparation for Adam Berry with the Colorado Energy Office coming next to the next meeting. Donnie, I'm going to make you co-host in case I miss any chats or in case I miss any people wanting to rejoin. I think I've got everybody though. So we did the open meetings law, and we did the Open Records Act review with the state attorney. And we are no need to do introductions. We're already there. We don't have any really new people this time. Again, future guest, we've got Adam Berry coming on 5/21. Still working. I'm going to try to get somebody from ICC and MBI on the standardized, excuse me, on the ICC MBI standards. We'll try to get that scheduled. And then we've got Colorado Fire Prevention and Control coming June 25th. I have been putting out public notices to this meeting. I think it's about time to expand that audience a little bit. And I'll send out the newsletter to all the emails I have, kind of letting them know that we have geared up TAC again and that we are talking about some information that's going to be extremely relevant to the industry moving forward. So with that said, last time we spent a lot of time on the electric ready, solar ready code. We also talked about IEC 2021, IECC 2021, and how that's going to be affecting the industry. We had some really good discussion on affordability. All these changes are going to drive up cost of units, but they're going to drive up cost of units statewide for on-site construction as well as modular and factory-built structures.
Sam, I have a quick question.
Questions they wanted to, or statements they wanted to go over again or discuss in further detail with respect to model electric ready and solar ready code and the new IECC 2021. Again, I think we've got a set of questions, and bring your tough questions to Adam. Donnie and I will try to meet with him before that May meeting so we get him prepped and our biggest concerns with moving forward.
Sam, real quick.
Robbie Schultz, he still wants to participate. He couldn't make this meeting, but he will try to make the meeting with Adam. Yes, Dean, you had your...
Yeah, I was just curious. I've been reading in the Real Estate Journal and whatnot. Some pretty big organizations in the Denver area have been cropping some lawsuits up around this, the periphery of this general topic. It's not specifically solar ready, but they're talking about the mandates to electrification and reduction of natural gas, etc. Is this in any way subject to that? Like, are the two tied together in any way, or is this totally independent?
I haven't seen anybody specifically address that relationship with this program. I'm going to make a note to talk to Adam about that before the meeting, so I have a better idea of what's going on with that. Some of those, I mean, there was also some concern that this was overstepping local government and their allowance of setting their own building codes, but there was some carrots with that with respect for the counties and the towns to encourage them to adopt. So I don't know, Dean. So the short answer to your question is no, not yet, but it certainly could. But I think it'll be bigger than just factory built structure program. And Dean, do you know if those lawsuits they were talking about, was it more along the lines of not allow changing from was it overstepping state authority onto local governments, or
It was less about that. The one that I first saw was the National Association of Office and Industrial Properties sent out a notification to its membership that it was joining the National Association of Realtors in a lawsuit against the city and county of Denver for their electrification requirements and their Denver Energy program, which is putting an infeasibility burden on a lot of existing building owners. And then you peel that onion back, and that's actually part of a lot of other lawsuits that are kind of tied to the same thing.
I've got to pop off for just 30 seconds. Sorry, I'll be right back.
Hey, Donnie, while we're waiting for Sam, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay, on this rule that's down there, this R 402.4.2.1, underneath that checklist, would the QII checklist that's in the energy code, would that be sufficient enough for verification of those air barrier elements?
yeah. So I think the table 402.4.1.1 is actually the table that's required in IECC to complete the air barrier checklist. And so if you have something that's equivalent or better, that's fine. But that checklist has to be started at the manufacturing process and then
Right.
finished at the site.
Okay, do we add this to the QA manual?
You can. It's not a requirement of us. It's just that, you know, if you just made the notation that the quality assurance is to be completed for the air barrier per table 402.4.11.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is because we get the checklist with the com check, and then now if we add the QII checklist in there, now we're adding to addition. The res check has to be done, completed anyway, but I mean, but the QII has. I'll take a look at this, and I think the easier way to do this would be adding the QII in there for the for the factory inspection, because then it gives them the criteria what they're looking for.
And you're talking about the that end document that's in the res check?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, it's equivalent or better than the table 402.4.11.
Okay.
So I would say that's fine.
Okay, you got it.
Sorry about that, guys. Now I've got every dog in the house barking. Donna, you want to keep going with these guys and talk about some of the solar ready and energy ready and blower door testing stuff that we've discussed, and I'll be right back.
Yeah. Tim, you want to say what you got to say?
Yeah, thanks, Donnie. Just a response back to Dean's question. Yeah, there's a lot of litigation floating around more in line with the electrification requirements and phasing out or not allowing the mixed fuel type buildings with various certain jurisdictions, City of Denver one, there are a few others, but the model electric ready and solar ready code, just to clarify, is strictly, at least on the electric ready and solar ready, it's just to make buildings ready to be converted in the future. So it's very important to keep that in mind. On the EV ready, it's also to be EV ready. There are some, there is a table that does require some EV installed based on the number of, or the type of occupancy. So just wanted to clarify that this was state legislation that was passed by, you know, the people who were elected a couple of cycles ago. And Broomfield, we've been enforcing this since January 1st. So I've got good experience, good and bad experience, I should say, in terms of how this is going to play out with even on the manufactured housing.
Yeah, and I guess maybe Sam could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think just for the purpose of our TAC meetings and what we currently have that's passed through statute, we still need to get ready for this because if there is any kind of lawsuits that do come up that do change this, that's probably not going to happen until after we go through this whole process and get all these rules made up for solar ready, the IECC adoption, and then electric ready code. We'd rather get all this stuff set up and put in rule, and then if the law did change, then we can, talk about those changes that we need to make on the updated rules from that point on. But I don't see how it can affect our current rulemaking process that we're going through right now.
I agree.
And then so Sam, you wanted to talk about what kind of brief summary of what we discussed the last session?
Well, I think the question will be, we've always had the question in the back of our minds on whether blower door tests are going to be required on site.
Yeah.
Right. And Mark, I'm glad you're here because I wanted to loop you into that with the new IEC 2021 and our currently modified and doing the crosswalk with our current 2015 IECC as amended. And then there's some pretty strict statutory restrictions on changing anything on that 2021 IECC that hasn't been approved by the Colorado Energy Office. That's what the big discussion I think we want to have. I know we sent all our guys to blower door testing with Robbie Schwartz, just in case that was going to be a requirement moving forward.
So you're asking me about the 6 questions that have been posed.
I know, so it's complicated, Mark, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but it's a conversation Donnie and I have had, and I think if we and I'll follow up with you, Mark, as we take.
No, you're fine, Sam. Basically, I have already talked to DOE about this and gave them the 6 biggest questions, and I've gotten 0 responses. They don't even know for sure.
Okay. And you said
They're
DOE, Department of Energy?
Yeah, Department of Energy, because they're the one that set the regulations for the CFR for it. And the problem has been is they're talking about a 3-tier system. And I know what 1 and 2 tier is because I deal with California, but didn't know what the 3-tier was and couldn't get an explanation. And I do have an East Coast state that's already adopted it that I've been dealing with. The biggest question is going to come up, Sam. What about commercial buildings? Are they going to be exempt from blower doors?
I think just across the board, commercial and residential, because the statute that is out says that the energy code that's adopted has to be equivalent to or better than the 2021 energy code. So people can argue that blower door testing, if you exempt that, then that would be less than equivalent to the 2021, which already requires the blower door testing and also duct testing. So,
and I agree with you, Donnie. The problem is in some commercial buildings, we are over 8,000 square feet. So at that point, the blower door test for a single blower door that doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm sure you're gonna have to get the proper equipment, or
right.
I think there's testing procedures for I think you can do them in zones, or
right, or you can sync the blower, you can sync the fans, for multiple doors, right? No,
so
we aware of the process, but it's not as, just like Sam said earlier, the cost is going up because of this. In this case, it's going to be a required test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that's why we have this here is because these are the changes that we're seeing that's going to come from the IECC. And to our current rule, we actually exempt the blow order test as long as you follow that checklist. But if we can't continue to have that exemption, then this rule 2.77 is going to have to change or be removed from the rules, because it's no
Okay,
longer, because the table itself is already required, right, for the IECC. We're just saying that if you follow that table and you check off all the boxes within that checklist from start to finish, then it should be equivalent to doing a blow order test, because you're showing that you're doing everything that's required within the IECC to have an airtight structure.
That's what I was going to ask you, is basically there's two sections of the IECC. One is for the materials, one is for the assemblies. If
Mhm.
I put a cross section in my drawings and basically show that I assembled, say, my exterior wall with the correct materials,
Mhm.
and it's not a tested assembly, but it is tested and listed product that's being done to make this assembly, would the checklist be enough to cover that, or are we actually talking about, actually having to test those assemblies?
Yeah, it's a tough question for us, and that's why we brought it up, right? Because the thing is, just like with plumbing, testing your plumbing, if you put the plumbing together correctly, then do you really need to test it? Well, the book
Right.
requires you to test it, right?
Correct.
Same thing for your gas lines. So it doesn't, although you assemble it how the book tells you prescriptively and tells you what materials you use and how to make those attachments, it's still required to be tested. Same thing for your air barrier. Like, hey, here's the materials, this is how you need to install it, but you still need to test it to make sure that it is meeting those air leakage requirement. So it's a tough one, but
Yeah, we're good.
And that's why we've spent a couple meetings on it. And what I would ask now is that on our next meeting, we'll have Colorado Energy Office with us. They're going to bring their codes expert. If anybody has very specific questions they want us to ask before that meeting, so to make that meeting more productive, please let me know now. Please email me those questions in the next 48 hours. And I'm going to set up a meeting with Donnie, myself, and Adam, and their codes guy before our next TAC meeting.
Okay.
Okay?
That sounds good, Sam.
Okay. And the more technical, the better. And yeah, just.
You really want me to go there, huh?
Well, I don't know, Mark. I mean, at the end of the day, here's where my head is, and you guys tell me what you think. At the end of the day, I want to make, if we need to make amendments to IEC 2021, I want at least the Colorado Energy Office to have seen them and be aware of them and say, yes, that's okay with us. I don't know that I have to have their approval, but I don't want anybody out there saying we're bypassing state statute.
Right.
And I think it's going to be, and Tim, and I know we talked about this, Tim. I know, Tim, you're very involved with those guys. There's not easy way to make changes to their model ready and solar ready codes. And the statute uses some, they're not big words, but the context of the words they're using as far as what we can and can't do to IEC 2021 may have a little wiggle room in them that we can take care of what we do. Does that make sense? And Tim, you're the one that's living this on a day-to-day. Have you had any problems yet with on-site construction of meeting IEC 2021? Are you guys requiring blower door tests and everything? Go ahead, Tim.
Broomfield, we have not had any product that's governed by this, by your group come in yet. We rarely get those in facts, but so I don't have an answer for that in terms of how that's going to affect statewide. I do want to just make a comment of the Energy Code Board that I still sit on. We're in the phase 2 portion, so to speak, developing the low carbon energy code, which was the second part of what that state legislation required. And one thing that the board is able to do is to make changes to the first code that was written, what we're discussing right now. And if we see changes that need to be done, we can bring those through. We have the ability by the state legislation to be able to do that and modify what's already published and what we're discussing. So that's a good point to bring up with Adam, to be bringing questions or concerns. And that would be something that he could put on the agenda for one of our meetings at the Energy Code Board to see if those are items that would make sense. And then the group of 21 would review that and vote. So I would encourage utilizing that process because that's going to be due. It'll be published June of 2025. So right around the corner in a way.
And you said published in 2025. Is that January 1st?
Yeah, so the actual, by statute, the board is required to have the final draft completed and voted on by the main board by the January 31st, 2025. And then anything that didn't get full support through the voting process goes to the executive committee. And that's required to be done, I think, by the first week of March. And then it's ready to get published or finalized and published. And it needs to be published by July 1st. So next summer. And then this board, based on the legislation, is required to have the second version adopted on or before January 1st, 2030. But I think you've already kind of touched base with this group too. So they kind of are working together.
Well, it sounds like we've got the opportunity to align our schedules and see and push some stuff through if we need to. All right, good. And then so Mark, and I'm going to throw it back to you. Any proposed wording of rule changes, and that can come from anybody, would be maybe the best way to go here. And Donnie and I'll help with that too. All right, cool.
With that being said, Tim, can you send me your contact information so that I can possibly sidebar with you on some of this stuff? Because I'm working with California, Washington, Oregon, all of these states that are front runners on this stuff.
Good.
And even in Massachusetts right now, like I said, they've already started using this system, and it's become a 3-tier system. And
Yeah.
maybe if I can bounce some stuff off of you, we can come up with some stuff for the board.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. I'll get you
That'd
all
be-
my contact information, and then I'll get you this slide deck also.
You
Okay,
betcha.
awesome.
Actually, I'll send this slide deck out to everybody today, so you guys have it. Okay.
Okay.
But I also guess we got to follow the open meeting rules we just listened to also, to not to get crossways. And now I got to figure out how not to get crossways.
So I can talk to Mark one-on-one. Yeah, you heard that.
Yeah.
The problem we have is Tim and Mark, you guys can't have a side meeting, right?
Even if it's code related?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm on 2 different state boards right now.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, Tim, you're in kind of a tough spot, but I think that, and and Donnie and I have had this discussion several years back. We broke the TAC up into working groups and solved some big problems. We could still do that, but we need to, I have to what Mike didn't say is that I also have to publicly notice every one of these TAC meetings, and there is a spot on our website where these are open to the public. And
Right.
If we need to have more frequent TAC meetings or some subgroups of TAC meetings, I can set up with 24-hour notice, I can put up a public notice and we can have a meeting and it can be recorded and we can do that. So, but I think the one-on-ones with staff is okay, as Mike said. The smaller subgroups of the TAC members, that's a little tougher.
Yeah, with that being said, thanks, Sam. I think that I'm sure it would be appropriate for me, on at least the State Energy Board side of things, is to receive any type of input, because I've been getting that from my colleagues, some of the building officials who are starting to move towards this and adopt the code, the current electric ready. And then I can bring that as an agenda item to the board as an idea. So I think that it's all legal. And I've been working for government for a long time, so that the term CORA doesn't bother me. And I like that one thing.
Oh
that
God,
he
I
had.
hate chorus.
The bullet point is just, when you write an email and you're a government employee or a board member, think about what that's going to look like in the Denver Post tomorrow morning. I tell that to my staff when I train them, so I like that one.
Yep, absolutely. All right, cool. I'm going to jump ahead to the next topic then, and that is standardized climatic standards for modular. We do believe, and this is kind of tied with one of the bills that's moving through legislation that we think is going to pass. Is the ADU bill, the accessory dwelling unit bill, and one of the things that is in that bill is a model ADU code, and we were thinking that might now be the time to really kind of put in some regional opt-in models for wind and snow, if it would benefit the manufacturers to come up with some zones, or that the different jurisdictions that are underneath that just opt in, and then you have one model, one set of approved drawings that can be used in multiple locations. And so has anybody given any more thought to that? I guess my biggest question is how beneficial is this to the modular industry to standardize some drawings inside your model? Sorry, to have a multiple address, multiple jurisdiction approved set of construction drawings for units that you are making in your factories. Mike, you were almost, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think there's benefit. I think the simplified way of doing it, that's a complication that is created by the home rule jurisdictions in Colorado. If you've been here long enough as a manufacturer, that's true. The only downside I see to it that we keep talking about, though, is that in the end, if it's a very broad brush and you always go with kind of worst case scenarios, you could also wind up spending a lot of time on something to simplify it, only to have everybody, kind of like using the prescriptive versus, performance path on res checks. If the prescriptive is so broad brush that it gets expensive, especially with everybody's cost sensitivity, you'll have a lot of people go back and just try to follow the specific guidelines of an area if it's overly worst case scenario and broad brush. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Mike. Tawny?
So my thought is that I think it's worth exploring, and here's why. So I've been having a conversation about a situation where there was a home to be built in a certain jurisdiction, but the plans were approved for a different jurisdiction. The structure would have been overbuilt to the location where it's being placed, and somehow that's not okay. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, who is the authority then? Is it the locals or is it the state program? Because I think one of the benefits for the industry is efficiency, right? If we have the state code, which we have the state building code, hopefully that creates some efficiency, right? And some preemptive authority. Sorry, Tim. And whomever else is on here from a jurisdiction. Because time is money. And if there are ways that we can create efficiencies, but also be respective of construction costs, I think that it's beneficial to the industry. Because after a while, if we're just jumping through all these hoops at the local level, then why do we even have this program? And I know that that might not be received super well, but there should be a reason and some authority with this state program, that we can all be managed under. So that's my 2 cents. I'm gonna stop talking because I see hands raising.
Yeah, I see some more hands coming up and I want to get to them, but Tony, my understanding, if it's overbuilt for one jurisdiction, it would get approved by us and the locals couldn't say no to it.
Well, and I'm gonna send you an email to talk about that
Yeah.
later, Sam.
And it may take more education on the, with the locals, but, I mean, once we approve the set of construction plans for a specific address, it doesn't have to exactly meet. I think it could over meet. Now I think Donnie was going to respond to that too. The other thing is, there's the cost of construction materials, which I think is upfront in every manufacturer's mind. But there's also the timing and the workflow on the line. Would it be more beneficial if you had a week where you could produce 3 or 4 units and that are custom built, that are not custom built, but are designed as ADUs in a higher population area, that could be then sold as needed and keep your lines going. Tim?
Yeah, thanks. My first reaction is, if I like the concept of trying to, this group being, or the state rules being more efficient. Usually you don't see efficiency in government in the same sentence, especially anywhere we do code stuff. But with that being said, I think that the other part of it is, if you take the worst case scenario for the, say, 3 or 4 different zones, and you're overbuilding for maybe 50% of what type of product goes in, I think that that's going backwards with what we're trying to do with attainable housing. But also, with that being said, since we've got the manufacturers being part of this group, and I think you just brought that up, Sam, is if the efficiency in the manufacturing process with doing it this way, and that group says it's not going to be raising the prices, it's going to be keeping the same or even lowering them, then I'm all in on that. So that's why I think it's important we have the manufacturer's input on this. So those are kind of my competing thoughts.
Thank you, Tim. Janine?
Yeah, I think that, and most government officials, I'm going to say most, because obviously there's one out there who disagrees, but most of us would tell you, you're more than welcome to overbuild. You just can't underbuild. So as long as you meet those minimum requirements, if you want to build a better house, go for it. I don't know many jurisdictions that would not accept that. There might be some disincentive by the factories or for the installers as far as jurisdictions that have use taxes, because that might increase their use tax costs. But other than that, I don't know of anybody who wouldn't accept a house that's better than the minimum requirements. Just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Janine. Donnie?
Yeah, just real quick. So, for Tony's, I guess scenario, so I'm actually currently working on a project that's similar to that in Ouray, the town of Ouray. And so there's I guess it's best to get all the information to see what they mean by overbuild first, right? And that's the type of conversations I have with the local building departments, because we do get the local building department say, hey, you don't meet our code requirements, which we explain to them, we don't have to meet your code, it has to meet our code, right? but we do take your design criteria into consideration. So the one that I'm dealing with in Ouray, they actually have a structure that meets the snow loads, but or the snow and wind loads, but the issue is that the energy code that was approved for that structure was approved for Alamosa, but it's going to Ouray. So it has a negative 16-degree design temperature approval on it. But when you go to Ouray, they're actually at 7 degrees. So that's 16 plus 7. So that's 23-degree change in their mechanical load calcs, right? So they might have met the wind and snow loads, but they're not meeting the same energy code rating, in which we still take into consideration the local winter design temps, right? Because that system has to be designed specific for that location. But let's say that the scenario that you brought up, Tani, where this home was built to a 50-pound snow load and 120-mile-an-hour winds, and then it was installed in a different location, and that snow load was 30 pounds and 115-mile-an-hour winds. Yeah, that's overbuilt on the construction side, but you have to take into consideration the energy code compliance as well. And so as long as the energy requirements for those two locations are the same, it should still be approved for those locations. So this is kind of ties into with this discussion of a standardized structure, is that if you can build to the highest wind loads, you can build to the highest snow loads, but the hardest component for all the manufacturers to comply with is always going to be the energy code, because there's different, I think there's climate zone 4, 5, 6, and 7 in the state of Colorado, right? And we have winter design temperatures that go from negative 22 all the way to, I believe, 16 degrees in the state of Colorado. So that's the hardest part for us to try to create this standardized structure, is how do we comply with the energy code? Because again, you can design to the highest wind loads and the highest snow loads, and that's fine. It's just the energy code that's going to be the toughest obstacle here. So yeah, I just kind of want to put that out there.
Mike, I think I saw your hand first, and then back to Tommy.
Well, I just want to point out that historically the energy calculations part of the spec package approvals are not stamped like the structural approved plans. And historically, my understanding was that was because the energy calculations can be rerun based on specification changes. So as an example, if I have an energy package for a climate zone with an approved set of plans, I can rerun that same package to a different location in the specifications with the energy compliance, and spec to spec, it might comply or it might meet. And if it didn't, you could take the same design loaded building, wind load and snow load, and potentially change the insulation or something that doesn't affect the structure on it. And when it was rerun, it might still pass. So I'm just pointing that out, that's I mean, you say it's hard, but in point of fact, realistically, sometimes if the design loads are the same, the energy compliance performance path is pretty straightforward if it's spec to spec or with minor specification changes.
Just real quick, so you got to remember that if you read the rules, the plan itself is approved for a specific location. So if you're planning to change things down the road, then it doesn't help to submit that as part of the plan submittal, right? Because we're approving a specific structure for a specific location. So if you're saying that it's going, for my example, let's say you're saying it's going to Alamosa and you're designing that structure to meet Alamosa's requirements, that's what we're expecting, right? But if it changes locations and goes to like Telluride, then it's a different location. It has different requirements. So the plan itself, when we stamp it, the reason why the plan set is stamped all pages is because it has all your architecturals and your MEPs. And on the spec file, the only thing that we're stamping is the cover sheet. That cover sheet is saying that all these documents underneath are approved for the spec files. We're not saying that these files can be changed, because if you're making any changes, just like any construction project you have, any changes require a revision to the original approved set, right? So if you're expecting to change those energy code requirements, you still need to submit to us for approval. You can't just change them. And yeah, that's our process. We don't stamp all the spec files. We just stamp the cover sheet. But
So,
they're all approved underneath that.
Donnie,
spec.
can you answer Dean's question on how to change an address on a unit? And my thought is, would a pre-approved zone for units, and understanding the difficulty with the climatic design temp issue, would that allow them to go any place within that zone as this group defines?
Yeah. So so let's say that you designed a structure that had a specific address on it, and let's just say that buyer backed out, and you still had this home that was completed, and you wanted to transition to another location. All you would do is just resubmit the plans for the new location, and then just making sure that the new location complies with what's already approved. And if it's not, then you just need to make those changes on the plan set for the new location. So again, even if it has a 50 pound snow load and 120 mile an hour winds, and it's going to a location that's 30 pound and 115, that doesn't have to be changed. But the energy portion of it, it might go from climate zone 7 to climate zone 5. You have to make sure that those energy compliance and the load calcs for your mechanical has been updated to reflect the new location. You also want to make sure that's done too, because the elevation might change, which also changes the load calcs for your mechanical. So not everything has to be updated, just mainly the address itself, and making sure that the new supporting documents support that the new locations meeting, or the structure is meeting the new location, or is better than that new location.
All right, thanks, Donnie. Let's run through the list real quick. Tawny, I think you were first, and then I'll go to Tracy, and Sean, I'll catch you.
Thanks. So I'm just curious, and so I'm trying to understand this energy code. Going back to the example that Donnie shared. So the Alamosa structure that was approved that is now going to Uray or wherever. So in my mind, it's overbuilt in every aspect, even with the energy code. So isn't it more energy efficient, even though it's built for Alamosa? Isn't it just more energy efficient going to this new location?
So Tawny, I think it has, and I'll let Donnie answer too, but I think it has to do with the efficiency of the furnace being set at 16 degrees versus minus 10 degrees. And I think that is the changes that we are, it gets down to energy, unit efficiency in the heating unit. Is that right, Donnie?
Yeah, and so it really comes down to the mechanical load calculation, because you're designing that system to meet the requirements of that specific winter design temp for that location, right? So you don't want to overwork your unit, and you don't want to underwork your unit, right? So if you're designing it for a negative 16 degree winter design temp, right, but it's going to a 7 degree design temp area, now you're overworking that unit, which is not, you're going to burn that unit out before the lifespan of the typical lifespan of that unit that you're installing. And so you don't want to do that, right? So it's not building an efficient unit. You're actually being an inefficient unit, because you're overworking that appliance for that location, right? So,
Right. And
just real quick to Sam, you can probably use that same unit in that location, but it has to be recalculated for the design of how that unit is going to work. So that's kind of what we're talking about with this standardized climatic unit, is that if you were to build something like that, you would submit a plan that can comply with the structural requirements, but you would probably have to do something to where you would do a revision, or you would do a site-specific plan approval for that mechanical unit itself, because that mechanical unit would have to be designed for that specific area. And it kind of runs in with the tiny homes too, sorry.
Yeah, and Tracy, I'm gonna go to you next.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have lots of thoughts, sometimes I lean towards, okay, well, if we had some sort of suggested methodology across the state and small businesses and your one-off builders could actually follow some sort of graph that said, hey, if you do this roof pitch, let's say it's, I don't know, a 312 pitch or 512 pitch, whatever it is, 612, 712, whatever it is. If you do this roof pitch and you have this structural framing and you meet these R values, then you can be in any of these zones. That's appealing, but at the same time, the combat that from a tiny house perspective is we have lofts, we have very small builders that are building just a couple of units a year. And yes, everybody's brought up costs. We have to respect it because it's closing down builders every day right now because costs are just too hard. For small businesses, right? It's not just cost of materials, it's rent increase 30%, it's insurance, everything's gone up, right? And so at some point, cost of doing business is not we have problems and that's why businesses shut down. Anyways, it's happening. But one of the most important things that really I think about when I think, oh yeah, maybe a table would be great. But then I also think, well, we don't know where these things are going half the time, you guys. And I want to ethically do this. If I have a lady that's living in California that thinks she's going to place her tiny house in Colorado, but she has no idea where, she's just looking for land nonchalantly, it doesn't help me go and build to climate zone to the highest, right? When she ends up moving outside of Pueblo, right? I just cost her a whole lot more money. And I probably did things from insulation and roof pitches and things that I really didn't need to do. And so we're stripping away the affordable living in tiny houses. We have an affordable living problem. We all know that. We know that we were supposed to do this project to not affect and displace people. But I hate to say it, you guys, these houses are getting really expensive. And we haven't even taken one through the state program yet.
Right. And so I understand that the different wind and snow loads are going to affect construction costs. And I don't know, I would think that a standardized climatic zones might help you, but you still got to figure out where that unit's going to end up, right? Or not, and pick one to build to.
Yeah.
With respect to the mechanical though, Tracy, I think your units are small enough that they don't have to be tuned to a specific winter design temp. If there's a small electric unit. So that's a question that I think we need to explore a little bit. And in the essence of time, I want to get to Sean. He's been very patient. And then we're almost at 10:30. But yeah, let's take a look, Tracy, on what kind of heating units are going in these, and maybe have a side meeting with Donnie and see if there's going to be.
I'm glad you're saying that, actually, Sam, because I was just literally looking up a hyper unit that is to negative like 16 or whatever. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, I guess I'm just going to move over to these new hyper units, right? Or like, if we have to think like that as tiny house builders, I'm okay with that. We want to standardize, but we need a little bit of awareness as far as, how do we still not take away from what we're doing? And yet still meet what we're being asked to meet.
Yep. Good. Thank you. Sean.
Yeah, I just want to make a correction to what my conversation, the house we're talking about from Alamosa is my house. And I kind of felt I didn't get the backup from the state that I was really expecting. It's not going to Ouray, it's going to Grand Junction. It's Mesa County. So what is in Alamosa at a -16, we're at a 30, whatever here. And the house is actually designed both snow load and energy code for a much colder climate. And I was just expecting, for lack of a better term, you know, Donnie to kind of come back and say, hey, this home exceeds, therefore it should be accepted. But that's not what took place. And so I went back to the manufacturer and said, hey, we need to change the address, we need to do this, we need to do that, but the design criteria is substantially colder in Alamosa than it is in Mesa County. And so what I thought would be an easy resolution, because Mesa County now requires state stamp prints on everything, which is a slowdown in our building permit process. But now I've got a county that is, if they see this happen again, they're gonna have the same belief that we need to redo stuff. And when I'm dealing with display merchandise, that becomes a bigger issue, because we do try and calculate it for a colder climate. But what I kind of see as inconsistencies just kind of grow some of the local problems that we have.
Yeah, and just real quick, Sean, yours is your project was a different project. I'm gonna talk about another one that I'm dealing with. So,
Okay, but still, mine was designed in Alamosa and it was going to Mesa County, and we still have to go through the process, even though it was a previously built home that had no changes to it. Changing the address is not that big a deal, and I don't know if the factory resubmitted, but this has been going on 10 days and we're still on hold with our building permits because I need updated state stamp prints.
yeah, again, I can't remember the exact details of your structure, but I'm guessing it's related to the energy code compliance as well. Even like I said, it's not just the mechanical loads that have to match the actual site location, but your elevations change as well, right?
Yeah,
and the
we're
elevations
we're about half of the elevation. We're much lower.
Yeah, so but the elevations change your calculations and your load calcs.
But
Right?
it should get better based upon that.
Maybe, but it still affects your load calcs. That's what I'm trying to tell you, right? So
So how do I order a display home?
well, we can finish this conversation offhand so we can finish
Okay.
TAC meeting itself, but
Yeah, we'll stick around for a few minutes after we finish up with TAC, and I think we're just about wrapped up for the discussion today. Mike, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Sam, that based on Donnie's response to what I said, I would say that if you're asking if there's a benefit for manufacturers for a standardized climatic zone design, whatever that is, that would make sense. But if there's some level of, we get all this done and it meets for this zone and we still have to send back in to a certain level some type of calculation to get some portion of it run through the state office to approve something, then the answer is no. There's no benefit to that. So if we standardize things to where we don't need to do that, and I would say right now, I do not understand why, if I have design load criteria that meets or exceeds, and I have energy calculations, heat loss, res check, everything in place that meets or exceeds, in the end, the local jurisdiction goes through and permits that now and verifies all that stuff. If we have a standardized regional or climatic zone and we can use that, that would be great. But if there's a certain level where we have to send back through to an address, certain part of it, and somebody at the state office has to look at it either way, that would be no benefit. So.
Okay, good to know, Mike. I appreciate that input. With that, Mark, you got your hand up, sorry.
Real quick, this is only gonna take a second. On Donnie's side of this, I understand what he's saying, because if I take and I run my res check and it passes by 8% for a climate zone 6, I do move it down to a climate zone 4. Underneath the performance pass with the windows, the insulation and everything, that 6 now may become a 3 percentage points, because that furnace and that envelope is responding differently to the wet bulb, dry bulb, all that stuff we talk about, Donnie. That stuff is different and it reacts all of that equipment, that house reacts differently. On Tracy's end of it, though, I understand what she's saying. But Tracy, if we have one that passes by 8% in a climate zone 6 and we move it to a 4 and it passes by 3%, it still passes. The issue is going to be the effectiveness and the longevity of that equipment. Because if that element is not working in its properly tested and listed environment, there's going to be some adverse conditions to the equipment. And that's what I think Donnie's trying to say.
Yeah, so like I said, that's the only part of what this we're having with the standardized climatic standard or building is that the energy code compliance is going to be the most difficult structure, the most difficult component for us to figure out and seeing what we can do to make a statewide or maybe zoned structure. And it might not benefit modular construction as much as it would benefit tiny home construction, because tiny homes are being designed to go anywhere, right?
Right.
So, but there's a benefit there. It's just who's going to impact the most, I'm not sure.
Yep, and so if you guys remember, I started this conversation with the fact that there's a big push to allow ADUs and build more ADUs. And my thought was how do we make that more attractive to the modular? They may not be 2-box, 3-box, 4-box units. They may be 1-box units.
Right.
And how does that look like moving forward? And it almost solves Tracy's problem, but not a lot of not everything on Tracy's issues. And it's not Tracy's issues, but the tiny home industry. With that said, I want to thank everybody for participating today. I'm going to stop the recording. Some of us will stick around a little bit if there is a specific questions you want to ask Donnie or myself. And thank you all. And please, I'll get these slides out to you today. If you have questions for CEO, Chief Colorado Energy Office and Adam Berry for the next meeting, send those to me within the next 48 hours. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks,
Have a good day,
Sam.
everyone.
Talk to you later, Donnie.
I see you.
And I need to figure out how to stop my recording. Here we go.